美丽的狮城新加坡是亚洲最重要的金融服务和航运中心，也是全球继纽约、伦敦、香港之后的第4大金融中心。那么在金融危机之后呢，全球开始讨论新加坡式的国家资本主义似乎表现出了强大的生命力。而在中国很多高层领导看来，新加坡模式也许还真有不少可以借鉴之处。那么今天呢，我们来到了戒备森严但风景优美的总统府，来专访新加坡政府的最高决策者总理李显龙先生。
新加坡人口526万，面积714.3平方公里。国人常用弹丸之地来形容香港，实际上新加坡的面积还不到香港2/3。但就是这样一个建国不足50年的微型小国，却是全球最富裕的国家之一。2011年，新加坡人均 GDP 高达50714美元，位于亚洲之首，是中国的近10倍。2004年8月12日，国父李光耀的长子李显龙顺利接班新加坡第3任总理。即便2012年因各方原因，他的年薪下调36%，李显龙仍旧以每年169万美元的年薪，稳获全球最高薪领导人称号。现年60岁的李显龙继承了父亲的许多秉性，作风严肃、干练、讲效率。但是他也知道，父亲有话直说的强硬领导风格，未必是新一代的新加坡人民所能接受的。2011年大选更让这位领导人意识到，选民希望政府聆听他们的心声，并表现出新的作风。历史的分水岭正在成型。李显龙说，新加坡政治已经进入一个新时代。
So it's a great pleasure and privilege to have you with us today. Actually, I want to start with Singapore's economy. Last year, you experienced a very sharp slowdown of economic growth compared to 2010. But this year, you are expected to have a 3% economic growth. Before the next year, you're going to have 4.5%, according to the economists. But what kind of the healing stories along this bumpy road of economic growth?
Well, 2010 was exceptional. We made, I think, 15% growth. It was a rebound after 2009 when we had a sharp decline and the global economy slowed, and we recovered very rapidly. I think we were lucky and our policies worked. But you can't grow at 15%. Even China cannot grow at 15% a year.
Exactly.
So last year,
what kind of the policies worked then?
Well, the most important thing during the crisis was to make sure that our people kept their jobs and we did not have major unemployment and major disruption. So the government took measures to help companies share the burden of the cost of employing their workers, particularly the social costs of paying for their workers' social security. It cost the government quite a lot of money, but I think it gave the companies a lot of reassurance, and it enabled them to hold on to the workers, so that when the economy recovered, we rebounded and the capacity was there. We could pick it up. They didn't have to go hiring again. I think that was very important. Also very important was that we had measures to extend bank credit to companies at a time when the banks were pulling back, and pulling back even from good companies.
I see.
Because money was tight, because confidence was lacking, and if they had pulled back, even good companies might have turned turtle during the crisis. So we stepped in and we shared the risk with the banks, and we extended credit to companies to keep them through the crisis.
Right.
Yeah.
But is this the main reason for the slowdown last year? Or?
No, last year was a natural slowdown to a more sustainable pace, which was about 4.5%. This year we expect 3%, partly because of external conditions, but also because our own economy is not able to expand as readily as before. When we were
because
growing,
our outside world is different.
Well, no, because to expand more rapidly, we had to import a large number of foreign workers.
I see.
And we could not sustain that rate of increase. It's just too large, and we get too crowded. So we are trying to moderate the rate of increase of our foreign workforce and to depend more on productivity growth and qualitative improvement of the economy in order to get growth and progress. And that's, of course, much harder.
I see. But any relevance to the demographic problem you are facing today?
根据新加坡人口普查统计显示，2011年该国总人口为526万，其中146万为非居民人口，每平方公里的人口数让这个城市岛国成为世界上人口密度最高的国家之一。同时，近年来老龄化趋势的日益严峻，也给新加坡的发展带来新的挑战。2000年，新加坡老年人口在总人口中的比例达到10.6%，开始了快速人口老龄化进程。据联合国的预测，到2020年，新加坡60岁及以上老年人口在总人口中的比例将上升到26.5%，届时将有超过1/4的人为老年人口。到2030年，这一比例将进一步提升到35.6%。
In the short term, already some impact because our own workforce is growing very modestly, hardly at all. So almost all our workforce growth is from foreign workers coming in or professionals and managers coming in. In the long term, of course, the demographics is a big problem because our fertility rate is now 1.2 children per woman.
It's better than that in China.
Only a little bit, but that in Chinese they say 50步笑100步.
Right.
Not good enough.
But how will you resolve this challenge?
I think it is very difficult to resolve. We've taken measures to encourage couples to have children, to share the financial burden of having children, to try and get employers to be more supportive of women who are pregnant and who have young kids, so that they can work part-time or they can have time off to look after their kids. But even then, we are going against a trend.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned in 2010 saying that China needs another 10 to 15 years to catch up with Singapore. Do you have the same opinion today?
Well, I think it's not so much catching up with Singapore as catching up with the developed world, because China doesn't benchmark itself against Singapore. We are very small. You are benchmarking yourself against the developed economies, the Europeans, and then you're looking at America too. So I think 10, 15 years to narrow the gap is not a short time. You're making rapid progress, but there's a lot of ground to catch up. In terms of size of the economy, you're already bigger than Japan. Yeah. But in terms of the per capita GDP, that's a long way. In terms of the sophistication of the economy, in the advanced parts of China, Shanghai, Beijing, Tianjin, or Chengdu, Xi'an, well, the gap is not so big. But of course you have the rural population, and that will take quite a long time to restructure.
Yeah. And also it is very interesting that quite some very high Chinese political officials, and they are thinking that Singapore is the best model to follow. So how would you conclude the essence of the Singapore's success? Do you think it's a typical example of the national capitalism?
No, I don't think we are the best model for China to follow. I think it's one example which China finds intriguing, which you will look at and you will compare other models, and then you will decide what is relevant and what will work in China.
作为新兴发达国家，新加坡的经济模式被一些评论者称为国家资本主义，其稳定的政局、廉洁高效的政府令人称道。这个华人占总人口3/4的东南亚国家，近20年来始终受到一些中国政治精英与知识分子的特别关注。邓小平就曾在南巡讲话中明确指出，新加坡的社会秩序算是好的，他们管得严，我们应当借鉴他们的经验，而且比他们管得更好。新加坡是否是一个值得中国学习的范本？对于幅员辽阔、人口众多的大国而言，这是一个没有标准答案的问题。不过，兼具西方和东方制度文化特色的新加坡，确实给中国的下一步发展提供了难得的借鉴。而如何看到别人眼中的自己，李显龙也为中国的大国形象提出了耐人寻味的建议。
We are so different from China. We are 3.5 million Singaporeans in a tiny island, and you are 1.3 billion Chinese in a huge country. So what will work in Singapore may not work in China.
That's true.
But what is interesting about Singapore is that in the period of 1.5 generations, we have gone from third world to first, and we have been able to establish high standards of government, progressive economy, prospering economy, good levels of education, good levels of social discipline and social protection, and stable government. And I think those are all areas which China is trying to find solutions to.
And if there is something, do you think what China should avoid in terms of the Singapore's experience? No?
Well,
nothing.
I think one issue which we have to think very carefully about, and we wish we had started earlier, is preparing for an aging population and preparing for social security, for retirement, making sure that people can work as long as they are fit and strong, and then beyond that, that they have enough provision for their retirement, housing, medical, as well as money to spend. And we have built up our system through the CPF, which is the Central Provident Fund, for these arrangements quite early. But I think that the challenge is going to be considerable because the numbers will be very large. So it's not just whether you've got the house and the money, but you need the nursing homes, you need the nursing care, and you need the social provision so people can move around, and the society is adapted to many elderly residents.
Right, exactly.
But you will have to evolve because today's situation is different.
How would you describe China's image in the international community?
Very successful,
very
impressive, very capable in pursuing its upgrading and transformation. A lot of energy at all levels. Internationally, increasingly an important factor in the calculations of many countries who see it as an opportunity to participate in China's progress, and also understand that in the case of many international issues, there can be no progress without the cooperation of China.
That's true. But any negative point?
Well, I think one difficulty is that it is not so easy for China to see itself as others see you.
Right.
Because you are seeing it from the point of view of a country which is growing and developing, and very conscious of the work which still needs to be done. The weaknesses, the problems, the difficulties. And your leaders often say, in China every difficulty is multiplied by 1,300 million times. But other countries see you as big and powerful, and increasingly powerful, and you may not always realize how powerful you are in the calculations of other countries. So I think that difference in the perceptions can sometimes mean that you don't always approach problems from the same point of view, and sometimes that takes some working out.
I think you represent intellectuals' perspective, but what about the ordinary people in Singapore to look at, to view the so-called rise of China? Do you think it's a threat? Do they think it's a threat, or it's a...
No, I don't think Singaporeans consider, not just me, but Singaporeans in general, I don't think any of us consider China's rise as a threat. We consider it an opportunity. We see it as positive for the world because a strong and vibrant China, prosperous and at peace with the world, will be an advantage to many countries. There's certainly tremendous economic advantage, and in the Asia Pacific, a strong China means a stable China, and we all need stability in the region.
伦敦、纽约、香港和新加坡是业内公认的世界4大金融中心。尽管新加坡金融监管当局很自信，新加坡作为区域国际金融中心拥有其独特的优势，但中国经济金融地位的崛起以及来自上海、香港等地的竞争，已使新加坡开始思考应对新的挑战和机遇，以期巩固并加强其国际金融中心地位。在任职副总理期间，曾兼任金管局局长及财政部部长的李显龙，如今又是怎样看待新加坡的国际金融中心地位？在李显龙看来， 中国包括人民币国际化在内的一系列金融改革又会给新加坡带来怎样的影响？
And let's talk a little bit on RMB. It has been announced saying that one of the two banks who is going to have the full banking license here is going to clear yuan section here, and which is I think it's a very step forward for the Singapore to become a kind of offshore yuan center.
Yes.
How will you say about the Singapore's advantage and the disadvantage to become an offshore yuan center compared with Hong Kong and even London?
Hong Kong, for us to compare with Hong Kong, we say 小巫见大巫. Hong Kong is on China's doorstep. Many Chinese companies are listed in Hong Kong. You raise bonds, renminbi bonds in Hong Kong.
Yes.
The intensity of the interaction is enormously more. But we have quite a lot of business with China, and we are a very international and globalized financial center. So from Singapore, you're connected not just to China, but to the rest of Asia, to Europe, to America, to Australasia. And I think that makes it useful for companies to be able to do renminbi business in Singapore. I think it's helpful to the objective of the Chinese government to have the renminbi play a more prominent role in international finance. So I don't see us as being a threat to Hong Kong at all.
But do you want to compete with Hong Kong in this regard?
Well, in some ways we compete with Hong Kong, but the world is a big place.
Yeah. And also RMB have something with the Asia's integration. You once said that if you want the Asia country to prosper, the way to do it is to plug in instead of unplug. And also, if you look at the Asia's integration against the backdrop of the ongoing Eurozone crisis, do you think are we going to have a very optimistic future in terms of the integration?
I think we are a long way from what the Europeans are doing.
Right, that's true.
We are not trying to go for a single economy or a single currency. We are just trying to deepen our economic cooperation between the different countries, certainly in terms of trade, in terms of investments, in terms of tourism, in terms of even arrangements like the CMIM, the Chiang Mai Multilateralization Initiative, where we help one another more in times of need. But at the same time, we are trying to keep Asia open so that we continue to do business with Europe, with America, with Australia. And I think that is a balance which we need to strike. We are not aiming for what the Europeans have achieved and which they are still struggling to perfect.
And also, the United States has a role in Asia, and they declare that they are coming back, and also they're talking about the pivoting in Asia. So how do you view this kind of the strategy change for the United States?
The United States has actually been in Asia all along, since the Second World War.
Yeah.
And our view has been that their presence is a constructive one, benign, that they have contributed to the security and the stability of Asia, and we hope that it will continue. I think when they talk about a pivot and a re-emphasis, it's a bit of rhetorical emphasis.
A little bit.
A little bit, because they have never actually left Asia. But we are happy that they are now going to, this administration intends to pay more attention to Asian affairs, and we're happy to see that Hillary Clinton personally has taken a lot of trouble traveling to Asia a lot and visiting many of the countries. China, of course, but also other smaller countries.
But how will you position yourself between China and the United States?
We are friends with both, and we hope that both of them are good friends with each other. It's much easier for us.
Right, but do you see any room for the leverage, or you can play a very important role?
No, there's no leverage. I mean, we are friends with both, and we hope to be able to contribute to good relations, but in a very small way, because we are a very small country.
作为人均收入最高的亚洲国家之一，新加坡与中美两国均有着密切的贸易和金融联系。李显龙也曾多次就中美关系问题给出自己的意见。他提醒美国人，不应该一直把矛头指向中国， 他说，美国出口到中国的贸易额每年增长超过20%。当你们不满中国的巨大贸易逆差时，你们却经常忘记，美国企业其实也从中国市场获益。
You have a big influence and can have a very positive impact.
Well, we hope to have a positive influence, but we are very small. And our advantage is that we have been friends with both for a very long time. And maybe once in a while we can say something which will present a credible third-party perspective which will be accepted in the other country. I mean, for example, when we tell the US that we encourage them to engage in the region, but we do not want to see tension or confrontational relationships within the region, and that no country in the region will support a containment type of approach in Asia by the US. I think that carries credibility because we are speaking from the point of Singapore, not from the point of China. But it's a voice, it's not a power.
But it's a very important voice and advice to China, also to the United States.
We try to say what we believe and to say what is true.
与传说中那些众说纷纭的印象不同，我们面前的李显龙总理睿智坚定，又不乏随性幽默。他精通不少中国的俗语，普通话说的也不错。于是他欣然接受了我们的要求，用普通话完成后半段的访问。他如何看待自己与父亲执政风格的不同？他怎样在 Facebook 上与国民亲切交流？他对中国的未来提出了怎样的建议？下周同一时间，请继续收看《燕青问答师承》专访新加坡总理李显龙。
美丽的狮城新加坡是亚洲最重要的金融服务和航运中心，也是全球继纽约、伦敦、香港之后的第4大金融中心。那么在金融危机之后呢，全球开始讨论新加坡式的国家资本主义似乎表现出了强大的生命力。而在中国很多高层领导看来，新加坡模式也许还真有不少可以借鉴之处。那么今天呢，我们来到了戒备森严但风景优美的总统府，来专访新加坡政府的最高决策者总理李显龙先生。
新加坡人口526万，面积714.3平方公里。国人常用弹丸之地来形容香港，实际上新加坡的面积还不到香港2/3。但就是这样一个建国不足50年的微型小国，却是全球最富裕的国家之一。2011年，新加坡人均 GDP 高达50714美元，位于亚洲之首，是中国的近10倍。2004年8月12日，国父李光耀的长子李显龙顺利接班新加坡第3任总理。即便2012年因各方原因，他的年薪下调36%，李显龙仍旧以每年169万美元的年薪稳获全球最高薪领导人称号。现年60岁的李显龙继承了父亲的许多秉性，作风严肃、干练、讲效率。但是他也知道，父亲有话直说的强硬领导风格未必是新一代的新加坡人民所能接受的。2011年大选更让这位领导人意识到，选民希望政府聆听他们的心声，并表现出新的作风。历史的分水岭正在成型。李显龙说，新加坡政治已经进入一个新时代。
So it's a great pleasure and privilege to have you with us today. Actually, I want to start with Singapore's economy. Last year, you experienced a very sharp slowdown of economic growth compared to 2010. But this year, you are expected to have a 3% economic growth. Before the next year, you're going to have 4.5%, according to the economists. But what kind of the healing stories along this bumpy road of economic growth?
Well, 2010 was exceptional. We made, I think, 15% growth. It was a rebound after 2009 when we had a sharp decline, and the global economy slowed, and we recovered very rapidly. I think we were lucky, and our policies worked. But you can't grow at 15%. Even China cannot grow at 15% per year.
Exactly.
So
But
last year,
what kind of the policies worked then?
well, the most important thing during the crisis was to make sure that our people kept their jobs, and we did not have major unemployment and major disruption. So the government took measures to help companies share the burden of the cost of employing their workers, particularly the social costs of paying for their workers' social security.
See.
It cost the government quite a lot of money, but I think it gave the companies a lot of reassurance, and it enabled them to hold on to the workers, so that when the economy recovered, we rebounded, and the capacity was there. We could pick it up. They didn't have to go hiring again. I think that was very important. Also very important was that we had measures to extend bank credit